In 1990, a shocking case rocked the United States when Pastor Andrew Scott, a figure of morality and dedication in his community, was accused of serial murder. For over 2 decades, Andrew had been a beacon of hope, counseling families and individuals in distress, leading large congregations, and offering prayers in times of trouble. His altruistic spirit earned him immense trust and respect, making him a model of devotion in the eyes of his parishioners. However, beneath Andrew's virtuous facade lay a growing darkness. He crossed paths with 18-year-old Abigail Reynolds, a young nun raised in a devout Catholic family. Abigail had always aspired to a life dedicated to God, but her sheltered upbringing left her vulnerable to outside influences. Admired for her beauty and charm, she sought guidance and mentorship, which she found in Andrew. The two met during a prayer service at Abigail's family home, sparking an unexpected attraction. The tension between them grew as they exchanged lingering glances, each aware of the moral implications of their feelings. When Abigail's family invited Andrew to stay the night, temptation proved too strong for both of them. As the evening progressed in the Reynolds home, the atmosphere became increasingly charged between Andrew Scott and Abigail Reynolds. After the prayer service concluded, the lingering glances and unspoken emotions created a palpable tension that neither could ignore. For Andrew, the feelings he experienced were foreign and unsettling. He had dedicated his life to God and his congregation, yet now he found himself inexplicably drawn to this young nun. Abigail, only 18, was caught in a whirlwind of emotions as well. Having long admired Andrew as a spiritual mentor, she felt a profound connection to him that she couldn't fully comprehend. Their interactions were charged with a dangerous mix of innocence and desire, as they navigated the thin line between spiritual respect and burgeoning romance. The Reynolds family, oblivious to the turmoil brewing between their guest and their daughter, extended their hospitality by inviting Andrew to stay overnight. This seemingly innocent invitation became the pivotal moment that would lead both Andrew and Abigail down a dark and irrevocable path. As the night deepened, both felt an irresistible pull toward one another, unable to resist the temptation that had taken hold. As the house grew quiet, the tension in the air intensified. Both Andrew and Abigail struggled with their respective roles. She, a nun devoted to her faith, and he, a pastor revered in the community. Yet, their hearts betrayed them. Unable to sleep, Andrew found himself wandering the halls, drawn to Abigail's room. With each step, he grappled with guilt and desire, knowing that crossing this boundary would change everything. When he reached her door, the soft knock echoed his heartbeat. Abigail, feeling the same pull, opened the door, and in that moment, everything shifted. The once clear lines of morality and spirituality blurred as they surrendered to their desires, initiating a tragic spiral into chaos. That fateful night, when the world outside fell silent, Andrew and Abigail crossed the line that separated spiritual devotion from physical desire. In a moment fueled by passion and desperation, they succumbed to the temptation that had been building between them. Their union, however, was not merely a physical act, it was a profound betrayal of everything they had vowed to uphold. The dawn brought a chilling realization of what had occurred, with Abigail awakening to find Andrew beside her. The bliss of their moment quickly morphed into fear and confusion. They were no longer just a pastor and a nun. They were now embroiled in a dangerous secret that threatened to unravel their lives. The weight of their actions loomed heavy, casting a dark shadow over what should have been a sanctuary of faith. As morning approached, the calmness of the Reynolds household was shattered. Abigail's father, a man of strong moral conviction, unknowingly walked into a nightmare. Upon discovering Andrew in his daughter's room, fury and disbelief ignited within him. Confronted with a scene that challenged his understanding of right and wrong, he demanded answers, his rage spilling forth in a torrent of accusations. In that moment of confrontation, Andrew was overwhelmed. The fear of losing everything, his reputation, his life's work, and the respect of his community, drove him to an unspeakable act. In a frantic bid to cover up the truth, he grabbed a pair of scissors, and in an instant he transformed from a revered pastor to a murderer. The stabbing was brutal and shocking, a visceral act of violence that echoed through the walls of the once sacred home. Abigail watched in horror as her father fell, the reality of what Andrew had done crashing down around her. Panic engulfed Andrew, and in a fit of desperation, he turned on Abigail, silencing her forever. What began as a crossing of boundaries spiraled into a horrific massacre, marking the end of innocence and the beginning of a nightmare that would haunt the community. The aftermath of the horrifying events within the Reynolds household was nothing short of catastrophic. The air, once filled with prayer and community, was now tainted with the stench of blood and betrayal. Andrew Scott, who had been a beacon of hope for many, was now a figure of terror and destruction. As Andrew fled the scene, he left behind the bodies of the Reynolds family, now lifeless victims of his unfathomable choices. The tranquility of their home was shattered, replaced by a silence that screamed of loss and horror. In the wake of the killings, panic swept through the community, the residents unable to comprehend that the man they had trusted could commit such a heinous act. News of the massacre spread like wildfire, drawing attention from local and national media. The image of Andrew Scott as a respectable pastor crumbled as reports of the crime emerged. The community, once united in faith, now grappled with feelings of betrayal and grief. Friends and congregants who had revered Andrew as a moral leader were left reeling, struggling to reconcile the man they thought they knew with the monster he had become. In the days following the murders, the emotional toll on the community was profound. Vigils were held for the Reynolds family, drawing mourners who sought solace in shared grief. Questions of morality, trust, and faith hung heavy in the air. How could such darkness exist within a man who preached love and compassion? As the community mourned, they also faced the daunting reality that their faith had been shattered, leaving them to grapple with the fallout of Andrew's horrific actions. It was a chilly morning when Martha, a neighbor who often took early walks, noticed something was amiss at the Reynolds home. The silence that enveloped the house was unusual, prompting her curiosity to turn into concern. As she approached, she noticed the front door ajar, a sight that filled her with unease. Stepping inside, she was immediately hit by the metallic scent of blood. The scene that unfolded before her was one of unimaginable horror. The bodies of the Reynolds family lay scattered throughout the home, their lives extinguished in a brutal act of violence. Abigail's father was sprawled on the floor, his neck a grotesque mess of blood and flesh, while Abigail herself lay lifeless on the bed, her face frozen in a look of terror. Martha's heart raced as she stumbled back, overwhelmed by the gruesome sight. The reality of what she had discovered was almost too much to bear. She sprinted from the house, hands trembling as she dialed 911, her mind racing with disbelief. The sound of sirens soon broke the eerie stillness, heralding the arrival of the police. The arrival of law enforcement marked the beginning of a thorough investigation into the heinous murders. Sheriff Henry, a seasoned officer with years of experience, was among the first to enter the Reynolds home. The chaos and brutality of the crime scene were immediately apparent, leading him to realize the severity of the situation. The forensic team quickly set to work, documenting every detail and collecting evidence. They noted the blood splatters, the disarray of the furniture, and the chilling remnants of a struggle. Initial assessments pointed towards a violent confrontation, particularly between Andrew and Abigail's father. As detectives began piecing together the timeline of events, they discovered that Andrew Scott had been the last known visitor at the Reynolds home. Statements from neighbors revealed that they had seen him arrive the previous evening, but not leave. This information turned him into the primary suspect in the case. Evidence collected at the scene included a bloody pair of scissors, which had Andrew's fingerprints on them. The investigators noted the shoe prints leading away from the crime scene, matching Andrew's footwear. The argument that had likely taken place before the murders became a focal point of the investigation, suggesting that Andrew's desperate actions were driven by fear of exposure. As the investigation deepened, Andrew's behavior became increasingly suspicious. When police located him at a nearby motel, he did not resist arrest, but the panic etched on his face spoke volumes. During initial questioning, Andrew attempted to deny any involvement, but the weight of the evidence soon became insurmountable. Under the pressure of the investigation, Andrew ultimately confessed to the murders, revealing the twisted motivations behind his actions. His cold and calculated approach to covering up the crime horrified investigators, illustrating how a respected pastor could devolve into a remorseless killer. The community, once united in faith, now grappled with the reality of betrayal as Andrew Scott's trial loomed, set to expose the darkest corners of human nature and the consequences of crossing sacred boundaries. As the horror of the Reynolds family murders unfolded, the investigation became a focal point for both the police and the media. Sheriff Henry, a no-nonsense lawman with decades of experience, took the lead. Upon entering the crime scene, he was immediately struck by the brutality of the murders, the multiple stab wounds, the chaos in the house, and the sheer shock of it all. This was not a random act of violence. It was personal. Forensic investigators began their meticulous work. They dusted for fingerprints, collected blood samples, and cataloged every piece of evidence. They noted the bloodied scissors, which lay ominously in the hallway, alongside a trail of blood leading from the bedroom to the main living area. The crime scene was secured as detectives began canvassing the neighborhood, interviewing residents, and searching for anyone who might have seen or heard anything unusual the night before. Witnesses described seeing Andrew Scott entering the Reynolds home but had not seen him leave. Several neighbors remarked on the unusual silence coming from the house that night, a stark contrast to the usual lively gatherings the Reynolds family hosted. These testimonies soon painted a grim picture of Andrew as the likely suspect. Detectives also delved into Andrew's past, seeking insights into his character. They spoke to congregants at his church, who described him as a devoted pastor admired for his community service. However, as they probed deeper, they uncovered a darker side to his personality, a growing obsession with Abigail, and a series of erratic behaviors leading up to the murders. Through tireless efforts, the investigation team compiled a timeline of events leading to the night of the killings. This included Andrew's increasingly inappropriate interactions with Abigail and the emotional turmoil that had culminated in the violent act. The investigators became increasingly convinced that Andrew had crossed not only ethical boundaries, but also moral ones that night. As the investigation continued, the media frenzy around the case intensified, leading to a sensationalized portrayal of Andrew Scott. Headlines shouted about the pastor-turned-murderer, capturing the community's shock and disbelief. The narrative shifted from one of tragedy to that of betrayal, further igniting the public's interest in the unfolding drama. The turning point in the investigation came when law enforcement located Andrew at a small motel just outside town. He was found sitting in his room, staring blankly at the wall, the weight of his actions heavy upon him. When officers knocked on the door, he did not resist. His demeanor was unsettling. There was a calmness about him that contrasted sharply with the violence he had just committed. Upon his arrest, Andrew was taken into custody without incident. As he was led to the police car, the flash of cameras captured the somber expression on his face. The officers could see the fear and guilt swirling behind his eyes, but he maintained a facade of detachment. During the initial questioning, Andrew appeared uncharacteristically composed. However, the detectives pressed him with evidence gathered from the crime scene, including his fingerprints on the murder weapon and witnesses who placed him at the Reynolds home. The reality of his situation began to dawn on him, and despite his attempts to deny culpability, the overwhelming evidence led him to falter. Eventually, under the relentless pressure of the detectives, Andrew broke down. His confession was chilling and full of remorse, revealing the turmoil that had plagued him since the night of the murders. He described the emotions that overwhelmed him during the confrontation with Abigail's father and his desperate attempts to silence Abigail afterward. His admissions painted a portrait of a man in crisis, consumed by guilt, yet still grappling with his actions. With the confession in hand, the police moved quickly to charge Andrew with 2 counts of first-degree murder. The community was rocked by the news. The man they had trusted was now a confessed killer, leaving everyone to grapple with feelings of betrayal and fear. As Andrew Scott's trial approached, anticipation and tension built within the community. The courthouse became a battleground of emotions, with family members of the victims seeking justice, while supporters of Andrew clung to hope that he might find redemption. The trial was marked by a media frenzy, with journalists and camera crews lining the streets outside the courthouse. Many members of the community attended, eager to witness the proceedings of a case that had shattered their sense of safety and trust. Prosecution and defense teams prepared for what would be a contentious battle. The prosecution presented a strong case, focusing on Andrew's confession and the brutal nature of the murders. They painted a picture of a man who had not only killed in cold blood, but had also betrayed his role as a spiritual leader. The evidence was compelling. They highlighted his obsession with Abigail, his denial of responsibility, and the premeditated nature of his actions. The defense, however, sought to portray Andrew as a troubled individual grappling with internal demons. They argued that he was a product of his environment, influenced by stressors within the church and personal relationships that spiraled out of control. They called on mental health experts who testified about Andrew's psychological state, attempting to frame the murders as a tragic outcome of a mental breakdown rather than cold-blooded murder. Throughout the trial, heart-wrenching testimonies were delivered by family members of the Reynolds family, recounting their loss and devastation. Their grief was palpable, leaving many in the courtroom in tears. Abigail's mother spoke eloquently about her daughter's dreams, the impact of the loss on their family, and the unfathomable pain caused by Andrew's actions. As the trial progressed, the jury grappled with the overwhelming evidence and emotional testimonies. The discussions were heated, reflecting the complexity of the case. Andrew's fate rested in their hands, and the deliberations felt eternal. Finally, after days of proceedings, the jury reached a verdict. As the courtroom held its breath, the foreperson stood to deliver the decision. We find the defendant, Andrew Scott, guilty of 2 counts of first-degree murder. The words echoed in the silent room, sealing Andrew's fate. In the wake of Andrew Scott's conviction, the aftermath rippled throughout the community, leaving deep scars that would take years to heal. The verdict provided some sense of justice for the Reynolds family, but it could not erase the pain of their loss. Abigail's mother became an advocate for mental health awareness and support for victims of violence, using her experience to help others in similar situations. The community struggled to come to terms with the betrayal of trust. The church that Andrew had once led was left in disarray, grappling with the fallout of his actions. Many congregants felt betrayed, their faith shaken, as they questioned how a man of God could commit such an atrocity. Attendance at services dwindled, and many sought solace elsewhere, abandoning the very institution that had once provided them with comfort and community. As Andrew began serving his sentence, he was left to confront the magnitude of his actions. In prison, he faced hostility from other inmates who saw him as a coward for murdering a family. Reports of his time behind bars indicated that he struggled with deep remorse, seeking solace through writing and therapy sessions. Some inmates, however, treated him as a pariah, further isolating him from any potential support system. The trial and its aftermath also served as a catalyst for discussions surrounding the treatment of mental health within the church. Many in the community began to advocate for changes that would foster an environment of understanding and support, aiming to prevent such tragedies from occurring in the future. Despite the passage of time, the memories of the Reynolds family haunted the community. Vigils were held annually to honor their memory, ensuring that Abigail and her parents would not be forgotten. The tragic story of Andrew Scott became a cautionary tale, illustrating the dangers of unchecked obsession and the devastating consequences of crossing sacred boundaries. As the community began to heal, they also recognized the importance of resilience. While the scars of the past would never fully fade, they resolved to honor the memory of the Reynolds family by fostering a more compassionate and understanding community, determined to turn tragedy into a legacy of hope. Thank you for immersing yourself in the chilling saga of Pastor Andrew Scott and the heartbreaking events that transpired within the Reynolds family. This case serves as a haunting reminder that even those who appear to embody integrity and morality can conceal dark secrets. It makes us question how well we really know the people in our lives. If this story struck a chord with you, please show your support by hitting the like button and subscribing to True Crime Unfold. Your engagement is vital in helping us shed light on these complex narratives that often reveal the more sinister side of humanity. We're committed to bringing you in-depth analyses of true crime cases that challenge our understanding of justice, morality, and the human psyche. As we navigate through these unsettling tales, your thoughts and opinions matter. We encourage you to join the discussion in the comments section below. What are your theories on Andrew Scott's motivations? Do you believe he was truly remorseful for his actions, or did he see himself as a victim of circumstance? Your insights can foster a community of passionate true crime enthusiasts eager to share their perspectives. Be sure to turn on notifications so you never miss a new episode. We have an array of compelling stories lined up that will take you into the dark corners of criminal history, exploring the minds of those who commit these heinous acts and the ripple effects they leave behind. As we conclude today's episode, remember to stay vigilant and aware of your surroundings. The world can be a perplexing place, and the truth is often stranger than fiction. We appreciate you being part of our journey to uncover these hidden stories. Until next time, keep seeking the truth, stay curious, and never forget, the stories we tell can change the way we see the world around us. Thank you for watching True Crime Unfold.